Welcome back, Spartans, to the third video of this mini-series on breaking into cybersecurity. And just like any Netflix show worth its salt, this one will certainly leave memories. And some of you may be wondering, what is life going to be like after this? Don't worry, there is much more to come. Most of us know or have that friend who constantly promotes themselves. Everything they say seems to highlight their achievements and their personality. If you are someone trying to succeed in life and land a job, it pays off to listen to and learn from someone like this. And if I ask you this question, what is the proportion, percentage-wise, of technical to soft skills that actually lands you a job? Most of you would probably say that soft skills are not really important and would be around 10 to 30%. And this is quite incorrect. Soft skills actually have a major weight in the decision process. And the reason for this is quite simple, because most interviewers don't have the capacity to be 100% objective, and they are swayed by personality traits. That means that the candidate with a great capacity to communicate and sell themselves will put you out of the game with much less technical skills. Let's talk about selling yourself. Short of having someone inside a company that puts your CV in front of a hiring manager, you are going to have to sell yourself using alternative channels. And here are a few options. Personal blog or website, code repositories such as GitHub, speaking at conferences, making video tutorials, for instance on YouTube, LinkedIn endorsements and recommendations, posting on social media, CTFs and bug bounty programs, and finally, online communities such as Reddit and Stack Overflow. In the interest of time and because I have not used all of these options, I'm going to divide these into three categories. The first one is building a brand, the second one is supporting a community, and the third one is competing. Ideally, you should combine at least two of the categories to expand your reach and improve your chances of landing a job. But bear in mind that different companies look at each one of these categories in a different way. Some of them may find them relevant, while others may find them totally irrelevant. Let's go over them now. Let's start with building a brand. And this one is my favorite. And I'm going to start with a probably shocking statement. What if I told you that you, over there, you are a brand? It's shocking, I know. But because you may not believe me, let's ask ChatGPT. Let's ask what defines a brand. And immediately we have a couple of options. And you will see that every time you run this query, you are going to have different results as expected. In this case, ChatGPT is giving us a name, logo, and visual identity, promise, product or service quality, customer experience, brand reputation, brand values, target audience, brand messaging, positioning, consistency, loyalty, extensions, equity, storytelling, and communication channels. Now that we have the characteristics of a brand, stop this video, look at each one of these categories, and see how you as an individual fit into each one of them. Now we continue. Each one of us fending for ourselves in this world and trying to move up the corporate ladder is no short of a brand. It is true that some of us are a Casio while others are a Rolex, but we are still a brand at the end of the day. Now, the first time I ran this question on ChatGPT, I got a smaller list that I got when I ran it the second time. But I really like the first list that I got, so I've decided to stick to this one for the rest of the video. Logo and visual identity, name, mission and values, product or service quality, customer experience, marketing and advertising, reputation, target audience, and competitive differentiation. And before I move on, I will make two observations that are quite relevant to get my point across. The first one is that your mission and your values dictate your target audience and your reputation. Now, your mission dictates the content that you share, and your values dictate not only the content, but also how you present the content. Think about the aggressive, opinionated influencer that you probably follow. And no, it's not me. The opinions that you express are going to put you in a certain category, and that is going to attract a certain demographic of people, of followers. And finally, the quality of your content is going to dictate your reputation. Let's assume that you are a threat intelligence analyst or a reverse engineer, and you decide to share threat intelligence on Twitter with the rest of the community. If your threat intelligence is not good, guess what? You are going to be considered a bad source of threat intelligence and you are going to have a bad reputation. The second observation I want to make is that the quality of your product, the marketing and the advertising will dictate your degree of competitive differentiation. Now imagine two candidates. The first candidate spams every recruiter, applies for every cybersecurity position with a bland CV. No conferences, no code, no published research. While the second one applies to a certain type of positions and he has a much better CV because he has been speaker at a conference and he also publishes a lot of research. Now, take some time to think which one do you think is going to be hired. This one is pretty easy. Now, if you go back to the lists that I talked about at the beginning with plenty of options, plenty of channels for you to sell yourself, only just a few actually help you build your own brand. Personal blog or website, code repositories like GitHub, speaking at conferences, making video tutorials, LinkedIn endorsements and recommendations, and finally posting on social media. Now, I've personally only used a few of these options. I used to have a blog several years ago. The blog still exists, but I don't contribute to it anymore. You can see it in the description. I will leave it there, a link. I have some LinkedIn endorsements. I have a GitHub account with a lot of code that I publish with tools that I built over the years. And I was quite active on social media, especially when I was a reverse engineering. I used to share indicators and also collect indicators from the community of threat researchers and reverse engineers. And I actually want to give a massive shout out to the reverse engineering community. I've met a few of them while I was working for Cisco. Really smart people, and I feel that your job is actually not valued and probably not paid enough. Keep fighting the good fight. Now, I've personally never really liked conferences. I was never eager to speak in public or present my research. I prefer to present my research through my blog. And also my blog was a way for me to share my knowledge. And actually, I wrote several tutorials on malware analysis that you can check if you are interested. Now, if you have to choose options, ideally, you should have a platform where you showcase your skills. This can be a blog, can be a GitHub account with your projects. Then you can leverage LinkedIn endorsements or perhaps recommendations to vouch for your skills. And finally, you can use social media to reinforce the reputation that you have and that you have built using these endorsements and these recommendations. And because you are building a brand, you must ask yourself several questions, such as, who am I? What am I going to talk about? What do I stand for? What are my values? What are my objectives and my interests? Am I blue or am I red team? And am I heavily technical, or I'm the kind of person that likes to spread the gospel of good practices and standards? You don't need to fit a niche. I personally don't. I'm the kind of person that likes to dabble with a lot of things. And if you check my CV, you will see that I was working on several areas of cybersecurity. This is my personality. But even myself, I have my own way of approaching cybersecurity. I like to build teams and I like to automate security. This is me, this is my personality. You have to find your own so that once you have this identity, you can start broadcasting it through one or more of the channels above. Now let's talk about the second option, supporting the community. Only when I started CyberSpartan Security did I actually start actively engaging and supporting the community. I had always been eager to mentor new hires, friends and acquaintances, but only a few months ago I started helping strangers on Reddit. Now, there are a few ways you can contribute to the community, but I will give you just two here. The first one is pretty easy. It's you contribute to open source projects, for instance, on GitHub. And the second one is you answer questions on communities like Reddit, Stack Overflow, or one of the flavors of Stack Exchange. Now, as bad as this may sound, I find that supporting the community is the least effective way for you to differentiate yourself. Because forums and open source projects are quite crowded places, and you are not going to have a platform there. It is true that some of these feed into the competition category that I'm going to talk about last, for instance with Karma on Reddit or Points. But at the end of the day, most hiring managers and recruiters are not really going to care about your PRs, your pull requests, or your contributions to open source projects. The powerful thing about branding is that it helps you differentiate yourself because it forces you to be entrepreneurial, while this approach just makes you another contributor in a crowd. Of course, there is a massive upside in engaging with the community because you extend your social circle, you meet very smart people that you can learn from. And some of these people actually work in companies, and in the future, you never know, they may actually get your CV in front of hiring manager and help you land a job. Now, some companies actually look for candidates in these communities. As an example, a friend of mine, he works at Google right now, and he has worked for Google for a while, for many years. And he was actually contacted because he was one of the top contributors on Stack Overflow. I was also contacted at some point, perhaps 1-2 years ago. I was contacted by a recruiter, and the recruiter sent me a link to Stack Overflow, to a post, to an answer, and said, were you the one answering this question? It was a question about networking, and it wasn't really me, it was some other Bruno Braga. But still the point remains that if you become a top contributor to a community or an open source project, you may end up landing a job because this is something that the companies value. The problem with this approach is that you never know which company is looking for what. You never know if it's worth contributing or not to some project just to get visibility of a company. But a rule of thumb here would be, if you are thinking about applying for a company that has a security product or a company that has good ties, strong ties with open source community, or has open source community projects, or even contributes to open source community projects, then it's a fair bet that if you contribute as well, they are going to notice you. Finally, let's talk about competing. You are going to find a lot of competition, not only in your field, but also in many areas and situations in life. In the realm of cybersecurity, Q&A forums, CTFs, and bug bounty programs are the de facto means to showcase your cybersecurity prowess publicly. If you are good enough, you can even consider making a living off of bug bounty programs, as some companies pay really hefty amounts of money to people that find vulnerabilities in their services and infrastructures. It is true that the competition is quite rough, as many people are competing and are part of these bug bounty programs, but there is very little downside for you to actually join some of these programs or compete in these CTFs. Because think about it, in a worst case scenario, you are still a competitor. And not only that, but you can actually leverage the knowledge that you get, what you learn, and even the vulnerabilities that you find, if you find any vulnerability, to showcase your skills on a personal blog. Remember branding that I talked about before. Imagine the following situation. Imagine that you have two potential candidates and they are applying for the same position. They are applying for a senior reverse engineering position, malware researcher. And the first candidate has participated every year on Flare-On, and he managed to get to one of the first 5 or 10 positions in the ranking. While the second candidate, teaches reverse engineering for beginners on a YouTube channel. It is a really tough choice between each one of these, but if I was the one recruiting, if I was the one hiring, I would definitely go for the one that participates in CTFs. And as we approach the end, you probably have two questions in your mind. The first one is, which one should I choose? Which option or options should I choose? And in this case, there are no hard rules, but there are some heuristics that you can use to decide. If you are a blue teamer, if you prefer blue team, then branding is essential. And you can do this through blogging, to share it on social media, build your own platform online. If you are a red teamer, on the other hand, competition is more appropriate. Now, regardless of your role, any of the options is good. If you are a blue teamer, you benefit a lot by taking part in CTFs and competitions because you learn how red teamers and how pen testers and hackers think, so that then you can bring these ideas back to your company and improve the security posture there. I believe that branding is actually necessary for everyone, not only for blue teamers, especially in this noisy world where everyone is trying to sell themselves. And it might seem like a hopeless endeavor because everyone is doing the same, but by building your own platform and your own brand online, you are still ahead of the people that don't exist. The second question you probably have is, but I'm a total beginner and I never had a job. In your case, probably one of the few options that you don't really have is endorsements and reviews on LinkedIn. However, you can still build your own brand. It is true that when you start in cybersecurity, you don't really know who you are and you don't really have a sense of identity. However, as you experiment, you will develop a sense of what you like and what you dislike, which will shape your personality and create your brand. The other two options are quite good as well for extra practice if you are not building your own tools or doing your own research, which you really should. And we reached the end of the video, Spartans. If there is anything that I want you to take from this video is that your online presence is now your portfolio. Because in a world where people are too busy to actually meet you in person or to take time to get to know you, and especially sifting through thousands of CVs, the way you present yourself online is going to dictate whether you are going to land a job or not. And as usual, if you enjoy the content of this video, don't forget to comment below. Feel free to leave any questions, any feedback, any criticism, whether you like my video or you didn't like my video or videos, because as I mentioned before, at the end of the day, this content is for you. It's made for you and shaped by you. Until next time, stay safe, stay paranoid.